My first year of working, properly working, salary, tax code, the whole thing, taught me more about money than the previous 22 years of my life combined. Not because my job was particularly well paid, not because I had some financial mentor sitting me down and explaining things, but because for the first time, money was actually mine. I earned it. I spent it. I made decisions with it. And I made a lot of mistakes with it. And this episode is about the lessons that came out of that year, the things I wish someone had told me before I got my first payslip. Some of these lessons cost me money before I learned them. Some I picked up by accident. And some came from sitting down and actually educating myself about how money works. If any of this sounds familiar, we've covered all of it in detail across this series. But today, I'm not recapping episodes. I'm just telling you what I actually learned from my own first year in the order that mattered. The first lesson is, and there's some, and the most important one in the bosa, is this: looking at your money is not optional. I spent the first few months of my working life genuinely not knowing how much I had. I'd open my banking app, see a number, close it again before I'd really registered what it said. I wasn't in denial, I just wasn't looking. And what I learned is that avoidance is expensive, not because something terrible was happening, but because when you're not looking, you can't make decisions. You're just reacting. And reacting to money is always more expensive than planning it. The version of this lesson that actually changed things for me: sitting down with 3 months of bank statements and going through every line. Not to feel bad, just to see. I found subscriptions I'd completely forgotten about. I found patterns in my spending I didn't know were there. And I found that the number in my head, what I thought I was spending, was almost nothing like the number on the page. The lesson isn't a tool or a budget or a spreadsheet, it's a habit. The habit of looking regularly without flinching. We covered how to do this properly, the full lifestyle leak audit if you want the structure. Second lesson: you need a buffer before you need anything else. About 4 months into my first job, my laptop died completely, and I needed it for work. And I had, genuinely, $43 in my account that wasn't committed to bills. I put the laptop on a credit card, paid interest on it for 3 months. And the whole time I was thinking, if I'd had even $500 sitting somewhere, this wouldn't have happened. That's what an escape fund is. Not an investment, not a savings goal, just a buffer. A small amount of money that sits between you and the moments when life does what life does. What changed when I eventually built mine? I stopped making financial decisions from panic, because when something unexpected happens, I have a buffer, which means I don't spiral. I just handle it. The number matters less than you think. Even $200 changes how you feel about an unexpected bill, because you have something between you and the worst case scenario. Build the buffer first. Before the investment account, before the extra debt payment, before anything else. We go into all of this in the series, but that's the headline. Third lesson: your credit score is quietly running in the background whether you're paying attention to it or not. I genuinely did not check my credit score until about 8 months into my first job. And when I did, I found two things. It was higher than I expected because I'd accidentally been doing some of the right things. And it was being quietly dragged down by one thing I had no idea about: a mobile phone contract from 2 years earlier that had a tiny unpaid balance I'd never noticed. A tiny balance, quietly affecting my score for 2 years. The lesson isn't that you need a perfect credit score. It's that you need to know what yours is and what's affecting it. It's not a judgment of you as a person, it's infrastructure. It quietly affects your rental applications, your loan interest rates, your insurance premiums in some cases. I fixed the balance, disputed one incorrect entry, and watched the score move in the right direction within 2 months. It's not magic, it's just paying attention. Fourth lesson: willpower is not a financial strategy. For the first 6 months, I was doing my finances manually, deciding each month how much to transfer to savings, deciding each month whether to make an extra debt payment, making the same decision over and over, and getting a different result each time depending on how stressed I was, or how tired, or whether I just had a difficult week. The decisions were exhausting and they were inconsistent. And inconsistent financial decisions are expensive. The fix was automation, setting up transfers to go out automatically on payday, to savings, to debt, to the escape fund, before I could make a decision about whether to do it this month. What changed wasn't the amount. I started with really small numbers. What changed was the consistency. The system ran every month, whether I was stressed, tired, or having a terrible week. Willpower runs out. Systems don't. We built the full automated payday routine in this series if you want the detail, but the principle is the point. Fifth lesson: debt is designed to stay. I don't mean that in a hopeless way. I mean it in a structural way. The minimum payment on most credit cards is calculated to keep you paying for as long as possible. The interest compounds quietly in the background. The default setting, if you do nothing, is that the debt stays. You have to actively decide to attack it. It will not shrink on its own. The thing that changed for me, when I stopped just making minimums and started targeting one specific debt with every extra dollar I had, even small amounts, the psychology of it shifted completely. I had a target, I had a method, and the dread started to lift. The avalanche method, targeting your highest interest rate debt first, is mathematically the most efficient. The snowball, when targeting your smallest balance first, costs slightly more in interest, but produces your first win faster. Research shows higher completion rates because motivation matters as much as maths. I use the snowball. I need the win. I need to see a debt disappear from the list to stay motivated for the bigger ones. Neither method is wrong. The best one is the one you stick to. We went into both in detail: the numbers, the comparison, the exact steps, if you want to run the maths on your situation. Sixth lesson: the skills you use at work every day have market value outside of work, and most people have no idea. I didn't realize this until I started paying attention to what people asked me to help with. Not my job title, my actual tasks. The things I did so often they'd become invisible to me. Explaining complex things simply, writing clearly, thinking through problems in a structured way. Things I did before lunch on a Tuesday without thinking twice. Turns out, people pay for those things, specifically with actual money. The exercise that helped me most: 3 questions. What do people ask you to help with? What do you do at work that someone outside your organization would pay for? And what have you learned in the last 2 years that someone just starting out would pay to skip? Those 3 questions surfaced 2 things for me that I hadn't thought of as sellable. And both of them are now income streams, not massive ones, but real ones, from skills I already had. We went through the full framework and realistic market rates in the series. But the starting point is just asking yourself those 3 questions honestly. Seventh lesson, and probably the most uncomfortable one: you are allowed to ask for more money. The number of people, smart, capable, experienced people, who have never once negotiated their salary is genuinely staggering. Not because they don't want more, because they're afraid of what happens if they ask. 3 fears come up every time. They'll think I'm greedy. They won't. Asking is professional behavior. They'll take back the offer. This almost never happens. It'll be awkward. It'll be awkward for 30 seconds. Being underpaid for 3 years is worse. Here is what I learned when I finally did it. I did the research first: market rates, salary ranges, what my role paid elsewhere. I had a number. I had a script. The conversation took 4 minutes. 4 minutes, and I walked away with more than I would have had if I'd said nothing. The impact compounds. Every raise calculated as a percentage of your salary, every future offer anchored to your current one. It all flows from the number you negotiated or didn't. We covered the exact research process and the scripts in detail in the series. The lesson is just this: it's allowed. Do it. Here's the thing I want you to see before we move on. These 7 lessons aren't separate. They build on each other in a specific order, and that order matters. You can't automate your finances if you haven't looked at them first. You can't attack your debt properly if you don't have a buffer absorbing the unexpected bills. You can't build side income into a broken system. And negotiating a higher salary into a life with no financial structure just means you spend more. The sequence is look, buffer, credit, automate, attack the debt, find the income, negotiate the rate. Each one makes the next one more powerful. That's not a course, that's one system built in the right order. I want to say something honest before we close this season. Learning all of this, really learning it, not just watching videos about it, was messier than it looks from the outside. There were months where the automation broke and I didn't notice for 3 weeks. There was an audit I did and then didn't act on. There was one negotiation conversation I prepared for, got talked out of my number in the moment, and had to recover from emotionally for about a week. I'm telling you this because there's a version of financial content where everything looks clean, where the person talking has it sorted and you're the one who's behind. That is not what happened here. I was figuring this out at the same time as talking about it. And I think that's actually the most useful thing I can tell you. Figuring out your finances is not a project you complete, it's a practice you maintain. Some months it runs well, some months something breaks. Some months life just gets in the way and you start again the following pay cycle. The goal isn't a perfect system, the goal is a working one. And working means running, even imperfectly, consistently enough that your future self benefits. Whatever you've implemented from this series, however messily, it counts. It all counts. Here's your challenge for this episode, and I've kept it as simple as I can. Sit down this week with a piece of paper and answer 3 questions. 1. Which of the 7 lessons from this episode is the one you haven't acted on yet? 2. What is the single smallest step you could take toward it in the next 48 hours? 3. What does your financial life look like differently now compared to when you found this series? Even if the difference feels small. Name it. Comment system below, and I'll send you the link to the season 1 reflection template. A simple 1-page guide for those 3 questions with a bit of space to think through each one. Takes about 20 minutes. Most people find that just writing the answers down shifts something. Season 2. Everything we've covered this season was the foundation. Getting the basics right. Making sure there's a system in place before we layer anything more complex on top. Season 2 is what happens once the foundation is solid and the conversations get more interesting. We're going to talk about investing and specifically why your 20s are the decade that matters most for compound growth and how to start with whatever you actually have right now. We're going to talk about property. What actually makes financial sense as opposed to what social pressure says should make sense. About tax, the things your employer handles that you probably don't fully understand, and the things you might genuinely be leaving on the table. In the big picture conversation, what does financial freedom actually look like for a real person in their 20s? And how do you build toward it? Season 2 is a different kind of conversation because you're ready for it. I want to end with something I haven't said yet. The thing that surprised me most about making this series was how many people are carrying financial anxiety in complete silence, not because they have catastrophic money problems, but because nobody ever gave them a framework. Nobody ever sat them down and said, here's how this works. Here is why. Here is what to do first. The silence around money is expensive, not just financially, it's expensive in anxiety, in avoidance, in the low-level background dread of not knowing. And you can solve something when you can see it. You cannot solve something you are not allowed to look at. So if there is one thing I want this series to have given you, one thing that stays, it's this. Your financial life is not a test you're failing. It is a system you haven't fully built yet. And systems can be built, lesson by lesson, step by step. One transfer, one audit, one uncomfortable conversation at a time. You don't have to have it all figured out. You just have to keep figuring it out. That is the whole show. Okay. Final loud budgeting moment of the season. And this one is quiet. A colleague asked me recently what I was most proud of this year. And I said, without overthinking it, understanding my money. Not earning more, although that's happening. Not having 0 debt, because I don't yet. Just understanding it. Knowing what's coming in, what's going out, what it's doing, and why. That's it. That's what a year of figuring it out looks like. Comment system for the season 1 reflection template link. Subscribe. Season 2 is coming and it's a different kind of conversation. We're going deeper, we're going further, and I genuinely cannot wait. I'm Chloe. Keep figuring it out. See you next season.